여러분 안녕하십니까? 급변하는 비즈니스 환경에서 원활한 적응을 위한 능동적인 계획 프로세스 구축 방안 웨비나 진행을 맡은 전자신문 권혜미 기자입니다. 오늘 웨비나에서는 변화하는 비즈니스 상황에 쉽게 적응하고 능동적인 계획 프로세스를 통해 조직 내 모든 구성원을 통합할 수 있는 워크데이의 지원 전략을 제공합니다. 또 호주 호텔 정보 제공업체인 사이트마인더가 워크데이 엔터프라이즈 플래닝 솔루션을 통해 최근 2년간 코로나 상황에서 어떻게 빠르게 변화하는 비즈니스 환경에서 성장했는지 알아볼 예정입니다. 이번 웨비나는 해외 연사분들께서 발표하시는 관계로 사전 녹화된 영상으로 진행될 예정입니다. 첫 번째 순서는 워크데이 APJ 플래닝 시니어 디렉터인 빈스 랜들께서 워크데이 엔터프라이즈 플래닝과 와디프 시나리오 모델링에 대해 소개해 주십니다. 두 번째로는 워크데이 플래닝 솔루션을 사용하고 있는 사이트마인더 분들이 직접 활용 사례에 대해 소개합니다. 마지막으로는 마르쿠스 디트리히 워크데이 솔루션 컨설턴트께서 워크데이 엔터프라이즈 플래닝 데모 시연을 해주실 예정입니다. 시청자 여러분들께서는 웨비나가 진행되는 동안 궁금한 사항을 채팅창에 질문해 주시기 바랍니다. 보내주신 질문은 강의를 마친 후 개별적으로 메일을 통해 답변해 드릴 예정입니다. 그리고 웨비나에 참여하시고 설문을 작성해 주신 분과 좋은 질문을 남겨주신 분을 추첨해 경품도 보내드리니 많은 참여 부탁드립니다. 자, 그럼 급변하는 비즈니스 환경에서 원활한 적응을 위한 능동적인 계획 프로세스 구축 방안 웨비나를 시작하겠습니다.
So welcome. It's always great to spend time, with my most favourite folks within an organisation, and those that are real, and that's you who actually do the real work. Most of you are in finance, HR, and other parts of the department, but really appreciate you taking the time out to spend with us today. So, quick agenda, and then we'll get into the content. I'm going to really just set the context for us before we really get to the most exciting part of today, which is hearing from a customer, and a very exciting customer in that SiteMinder, and really hearing from that FP&A team in terms of how they've been able to go about navigating the pandemic, a public listing, but also, with the day-to-day challenges that FP&A presents the organisation. And then you'll get to see a demonstration of Workday Adaptive Planning from Marcus, who joins us from Singapore. So getting into the content, and really just wanted to unpack this a little bit more, is setting the context on something that's probably topical for all of us today, and that we're certainly going through unprecedented times where we're seeing disruption and living through that disruption, as we go day to day, week to week. And in times of uncertainty, the role of FP&A, has never been so important in how you engage and help companies respond and recover, as we all plan for what's ahead of us. In a recent Deloitte report, it stated that realistic and detailed extended financial forecasting is a key tool in navigating this uncertainty and informing the required leadership actions. And planning plays a pivotal role in allowing companies to be more agile. We're seeing that when planning becomes strategic and not just an annual budgeting process, it allows organizations to make better decisions and quickly act on those decisions. A new planning paradigm allows companies to see critical drivers with speed. Some examples of that is making rapid decisions based on cash flow and liquidity, or rolling forecasts that allow you as a business to continuously plan and adjust for what's ahead, or what if scenario modeling to chart the best way to respond and recover, which is what we're focusing on today. But the reality of business today is that decision-making process really prevents agility, which is critical in these times. And that the planning process is not proactive, nor is it data-driven. That most of the planning capacity is stuck in manual work, caught up in multiple loads of Excel, and even in most cases still with a planning application. Reports for the business users suffer from the data integrity and data integration issues, and that it's simply just not timely and it lacks relevance to the business. And at a time when companies need to run weekly, monthly forecasts and what if scenarios, that current planning process is really designed for an annual budgeting process at best. And the static process is designed to help you analyze what happened, not model what's likely to be ahead. So to achieve business agility, what's required is an active planning process, and a process that helps you make better decisions faster, to respond quickly to the changing situations. One that's collaborative, that involves all users, from finance to HR, from executives to analysts. This process, was hard enough when everybody was sitting in the same office or in the same conference room. It's become even more challenging as we've moved to the virtual working environments that we're all in today. It's got to be comprehensive in that it's not just a finance view or a HR view. It needs to model, analyze, and see the impact across all the aspects of your business. And one that is continuous, because we've all learned that you can't rely on an annual plan. You need to continually review the external factors with internal data, adjust, and replan. Our customers tell us that with adaptive planning, they have become more strategic to the business and that they've helped their company accelerate that decision-making process. In fact, when we surveyed our customers recently, 93% of those customers tell us that they accelerated the cycle time by 30% or more for planning, reporting, and analysis. 88% of those customers stated that their role became more strategic and that they are better partners to the business. And 93% of customers increased the time that they spent on higher value add tasks by 20 to 30%. At Workday, we've gone through our own business agility experience ourselves, and that we use and we run the business with Workday Adaptive Planning. And we've been able to achieve 40% increases in the time spent analyzing trends versus the preparation of the data. So that's that move from static to being an agile business, and a 50% reduction in the reporting cycle times with automation and self-service. And we've helped organizations across all of Asia Pacific and Japan and globally, over 5,500 customers across the globe, 500 plus within our region, with a large majority of those organizations in Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore, but also across multiple industries as well. And it's something that we're passionate about and that we've been able to enable business agility for you. So with a Workday Adaptive Planning, you get a planning platform that supports your entire company. This planning platform enables not just power users or analysts, but everybody within the organization to participate. That it's not just finance, but it's every function at every level to plan the details for their needs and then bring it all back together into a holistic company-wide business plan. And here are some use cases of how different functions across the organization would participate in this planning process. And it's all these use cases across the entire company that are possible because, as I touched on earlier, is that Workday Adaptive Planning is designed for the business user. In that, in finance, which most of you are in, it's really focused on that traditional planning process, but it's also tailoring, that ease of use of being able to interact with the application and enable your HR department to focus on skills and what's important for them as a department, or for your sales and marketing teams in terms of how do they help you drive that revenue number through campaign investments and what's high yielding versus low yielding and quota and capacity models. So it's really about enabling, that company-wide planning to all come together as part of that single business plan for the organization. And being built for the business users, so just expanding on that, means far more than a great user interface. It means it's allowing the users to work and analyze the way that you want seamlessly without having to keep track of the latest data or the waiting, for reports to run, which depending on, on where you are in your organizations, that can be 2 hours, 1 day, could be more. From day one, Workday Adaptive Planning was built with a multi-tenant in-memory engine so that you always get performance, scale, and flexibility that you need in real time with no batch processing. modeling, reporting, and analytics that are done on the platform with no separate applications or data transfers or integrations between those systems. And with our data integration framework is that business users, and not just IT, can integrate any data source from your transactional systems, whether they be ERP, customer relationship management applications, payroll, data warehouses, all over APIs, and really allowing you to maintain a single source of truth. Workday Adaptive Planning can support all customers, whether you're deploying Workday Adaptive Planning as a standalone planning solution with other third-party ERP systems, or with Workday HCM or Workday Financial Management to gain the benefits of a single solution. It's a platform that is able to deliver best-in-class planning solution, and with Workday HCM and Financial Management, a better in-suite experience for you as a customer as you achieve and unlock the vision that we have of planning, executing, and analyzing on a single solution. And with Workday Adaptive Planning, it has the same DNA as Workday's technology and the continuous focus on two things, that is customer success, and customer success through not only your experience, but through continuous innovation. And that commitment to innovation and customer success is recognised across the industry. To highlight a few, we're ranked #1 in the Fortune Future 50 list, which ranks global companies with the best prospects for long-term growth, and ranked #2 as the world's most innovative companies. And the innovation, of course, applies to Workday Adaptive Planning and our patent-pending Elastic Hypercube technology, which powers Workday Adaptive Planning. And we deliver that product innovation that is loved and used by 5,500 plus customers across the globe and across Asia Pacific as a region. And it's a product that gets the highest user ratings and delivers business agility in the times of change. And with that, we will move on to the next segment. Okay, so we're moving on to our next segment now, and it's the most exciting part, which is hearing from SiteMinder, and really just a customer who's undertaken the journey as a move from that static planning and achieving and realizing business agility with Workday Adaptive. So with that, I'm going to ask Jessica Ang, who's the FP&A director for SiteMinder. Jessica, if you could just introduce yourself and the team, but also tell us a little bit about SiteMinder as a company.
Oh, thank you, Vince. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Ang, and I'm the FP&A director at SiteMinder, and I've been with the business for over 2 years. In my team, I've got Andy Judson, who is the FP&A analyst, as well as Ribu Sinha, who's our program manager for our finance system transformation. Really happy to share with you about the story of SiteMinder. So we are the world's leading open hotel commerce platform that provides everything a hotel needs to start, upgrade, and or scale a successful business hotel. As you all may have known, we recently listed on the ASX, the Australian Stock Exchange, and it's been a wonderful journey over the last 16 years.
Yeah, awesome news. And I must admit, in the 2 years that we've all collectively had, it's just great to see such an Aussie success, and awesome, right, for you as a team. But I can imagine as an FP&A team, having gone into your, I guess, listing in its own way brings its own challenges, right, with that excitement from a finance perspective. So really keen to dig into that. Perhaps before we go a little deeper, perhaps just to kick things off, maybe to put it in a context is, could you tell me a little bit about who's using Workday Adaptive Planning and how are they using that? Just to put into context, I guess, how it's used today.
Sure. So our Workday Adaptive Planning is being used obviously by the FP&A team, but also amongst the executive leadership team, our CFO as well as CEO is also using it. And Adaptive has been instrumental in helping us, navigate the last 2 years during the greatest pandemic of our time. So it is a tool that, everyone's in probably quite often, and we use that in all our reforecast meetings with each of the executive team members.
Yeah, nice. No, that's a good two segment to it, right? And that it's, I guess, within the engine of FP&A, but at the same time, that sounds like there's a fair bit of trust in terms of being, open and driving that visibility of that information to the C-suite. That's quite exciting. Probably just one question just to help set the context, and then we'll dive into some of the detailed content that I know, Andy, you'll probably be keen to perhaps get into. And that question is what were some of the drivers for change and implementing Workday Adaptive in the first instance? And maybe Ribu, that or Jessica, keen to get your guidance on who could answer that.
Yeah, I think Ribu, if you'd like to answer that.
When we started this journey of implementation of Adaptive, it was we were on Excel, as you said. There was a lot of effort that went into planning process. So for us, it was the major drivers were a mature and a develop in-house expertise on Adaptive. That is something we were very mindful to develop in-house. We wanted to implement a minimum viable product and then mature our planning models over a period of time. It was a journey we wanted to undertake with the FP&A team, that the team gets matured on the product and the product matures with us from a planning perspective. We wanted to ensure that the cost and effort is spread over a couple of quarters, and we had to maintain cost at a level which was very tight. So those were my major drivers when we started the implementation of Adaptive.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ribu. Just if I could just stay with you, just to double click a little on the system side, and then we'll come back into the business. And whether it's now or even back then, but maybe just wanting to try and paint the, just architecturally in terms of where is the data being pulled from in terms of what transaction systems are feeding the planning process that the team are executing there.
So architecturally, when we started implementation for Adaptive, just before that, we had implemented Workday Finance. So a couple of months before that, we were actually on Xero and Excel sheets. So planning was all Excel sheets, accounting was Xero, and we have a subscription billing system called Zora we use. So we implemented Workday, and then we started with Adaptive. With Adaptive, we were able to replace a lot of Excel sheets. So now Adaptive, basically, we use power of one, get all the data from Workday into Adaptive, but all our billing and revenue still comes from Zora, and we are still working on that to basically, so that's still a manual process, but ultimately it does end up in Adaptive.
No, awesome. And I think one of the things I touched on a little bit earlier for Workday financial customers and Workday HCM customers is really achieving that technology simplification by having a single solution for planning, execution, and analysis, which is awesome that you've been able to achieve that. But also the power of being able to bring in billing and other drivers and data that drives your planning process. So thank you. That's given a good context in terms of the breadth and data that feeds the planning process. Maybe if I bring the questions back into now, listing a company in a pandemic and what that means, Jessica and Andy, from in terms of that whole process. But perhaps before we get to the listing, maybe if I could just step back a little bit, and just in general, I think some of the things I hear a lot from our customers, and we've even seen ourselves within our own operations, is that we saw the number of scenario models or just the whole concept of scenario planning and the running of what if scenarios increase by 30x when we all went into the, I guess, global lockdowns back in 2020. And that has just been consistent. And, really in terms of I guess the the business's demand for knowing of the unknown. So maybe if we start there and just keen to really understand what that experience has been like for the team at SiteMinder, and I guess as you've prepared for that listing, I could only imagine the amount of planning and forgetting about the reporting, right? This is just purely the planning as you've prepared and getting yourself ready to then move into the rigor of forecasting and replanning that has come with the listing. But perhaps if we can maybe just go into COVID and just some of the things that, some of the benefits that perhaps you've been able to see with Adaptive in that time.
Yeah, so when COVID hit, travel stopped overnight, and this meant we had to respond quickly to this change. So we had to come up with different playbooks for each market to continue supporting our customers, but also we had to revisit our cost base early on. So this meant a full review of headcount, resource plan, and all program costs. Now, Adaptive has allowed us to, as you say, generate multiple scenarios to cost out all the different variables. And having a three-way cash flow model meant we could change our operating model in terms of predicting, what the recovery would be on revenue and the cost impact on our cash burn. And I'll let Andy go into details on all the different scenarios that we've actually done. So, Andy?
Yeah, so obviously over the last 24 months, domestic and international borders have gone into lockdown and then opened up sporadically, often with very little to no warning. And so we've had to be quite agile. And one of the key things that's meant is that we've had to do almost weekly reforecasts sometimes, especially during particularly challenging times, such as the recent Omicron variant. And what our modelling has been able to do is to look to build different scenarios and build them out at different regional levels so we can assess the impact particularly on our transactional revenue, of what different levels of expected activity have on our on our underlying customers and how that affects our revenue lines as well. And in terms of the different scenarios we've looked at, because we're a recurring subscription and transaction revenue model, we're generally focused on annual recurring revenue, which is ARR, but also all of the key metrics that you associate with a SaaS company. So, for example, lifetime value and cost of acquiring customers, so LTV and CAC, our customer churn and revenue churn, how fast our customers are churning out, which has been very much, especially at the beginning, was affected by COVID. And then also, quite importantly, our cash flow management. And Adaptive has allowed us to model different scenarios based on the different expected levels of recovery, both within certain regions or looking internationally as a whole, and what impact that is having on all of those different metrics.
Yeah, there's a bit in that. If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind just double clicking into that a little bit more. In that, I get the predictability piece. I think ARR being a tech company in Workday as well, I think predictability and that the ability to predict recurring revenue is really tricky, especially when we're having to deal with international markets and that constant change, and even with today, I guess we're kind of celebrating as Australians, for those of us that are in New South Wales, Victoria, on the East Coast, I should say. But then I know some of the folks that are joining us from Asia, they're still very much in lockdown or potentially thinking about lockdown. So there's that continuous gauge as to where and what can you predict in terms of that forecast. On that point, just with your scenario modelling and probably as you were preparing for the listing, what were some of those, I guess, just challenges with how that was done prior?
So one of the key bits of volatility has been obviously FX rates and underlying currencies. Those have been very volatile in the last 2 years. And what Adaptive lets us do is it lets us model either by using constant currencies, so kind of using FX assumptions that are flat across the board, so we can kind of try and look at the underlying performance and strip out the noise that's generated by FX, and hopefully identify what's actually improving or what's changing as a result of a change in market conditions. And at the same time, that helps us identify to what extent we're exposed on different currencies. And so if there's a currency in a particular region, say the euro in Europe, is affected by European-wide lockdowns, what effect that might have on us, both at the kind of underlying performance level, but also just at the currency level, and how that will change our bottom line.
Yeah, nice. I like, you're spot on, right? I mean, I think we can overcook that point, but I like how you made that quite simple, right? And that's such a complex problem that does present. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, really, it's if you've got comfort in your growth, comfort in the ability to predict that growth, and then the only other anomaly, I guess, in all of that would be is your foreign exchange impacts and just getting the visibility near real time to cover that. No, that's helpful. So having used, I guess, adaptive for, I think it's 2 years now, Ribu, probably going on 3 years, and then I guess in particular, probably over the last 12 months, what are some of the primary benefits, you know, that the team have been able to achieve, and maybe it's probably a question within FP&A, Jessica and Andy, but probably just back to yourself.
I think having an agile financial model is more relevant ever than before. And we are constantly doing reporting both internally and also externally now. And we have, you know, forecast model that's a rolling 18-monthly forecast. We have half one, half two budgets. We've got 3-year operating plans as well as internal targets. So lots of different models that we're running at the same time. And to be completely honest, you know, being able to model what a reacceleration scenario as travel recovers will help us, as we are now in a listed environment, to be able to look at what the, you know, future forecast would be for our investors and analysts. So I think the benefits to date has been, you know, I can't put into words. It has really helped us to make decisions in the business in a very short period of time, and also have given confidence to, you know, our CEO and CFO in terms of the reporting, both internally and externally.
Yeah, 2 questions are going to come out of that. One is a bit of a cheeky one, which is, I think you kind of led me there, is how would have you coped with that? And I'm just thinking, just that point, right? The long hours in preparation, but how would have you coped if, you know, if you didn't have Workday adaptive planning?
I would say we wouldn't have coped very well.
I know, as someone who worked in FP&A before, I could only imagine because you've got so many moving parts with an ARR business. But sorry, you keep going. Yeah,
and I think you know, coming from the words of our CEO, he's been absolutely you know, in all of having adaptive for the business. So, and it's because, you know, he's able to really navigate and look at all the different scenarios and be able to, you know, get confidence in what the, you know, forecast will look like. So I would say we wouldn't have coped very well on Excel, only because you can't be as agile as adaptive.
No, nice. And just the second question there was on the reporting piece. It was a good kind of reminder for me, because I Ribu, you kind of led me there early in the architecture. Was how is the reporting being, I guess, accomplished for you today? As in, are you doing that in adaptive? Are you driving your financial management reports out of adaptive, or
they are driven in adaptive? We do a lot of reports in Workday, but wherever we need a planning data and actuals, that is all coming out of adaptive. We have the power of one Workday adaptive integration running a couple of times or on an ad hoc basis. So that has really helped in terms of whenever there's a change, we don't have to wait or do a manual. We just have to run the integration, which is really nice.
Yeah. And maybe Andy, probably looking at you to just expand a bit on that, just whether you're able just to share how you're using adaptive, because there's the planning element of it. One of the things I touched on a little bit earlier was just around the ability to you know, to really bring as much of that financial reporting or financial management reporting in or helping with that. you able to perhaps just share a little bit more about how you use the adaptive for reporting as well?
Yeah, so we use it for our monthly. We have monthly reporting packs which go out to our executive team, and a lot of the outputs for that are generated directly from adaptive, and also along with using it for our modeling, the fact that the drivers and key KPIs are in adaptive as well means we can pull those out and also present those as part of that reporting too.
Oh, nice. Final question, and completely up to you whether you're in terms of the sequence to answer it. But some of the organisations that have joined us today, they'll be trying to deal with with the changes that their businesses have been faced with as they either maintain the pandemic or accelerate out of the pandemic. So any guidance or feedback, as they're sitting there and thinking about a planning application like Workday Adaptive Planning?
I would say that adaptive is something that it's easy to roll out. You would actually, and the more that you use it, you actually then will be able to benefit greatly. It's something that you need accuracy with regards to, in the FP&A world, the three-way cash flow model, everything needs to line up and nothing's left on the table. So it gives you that certainty that all your financial reporting and forecasting is done complete and accurately. So that's something which, sometimes will be hard to pick up if it's in Excel with breakages and formulas or linkages, but with adaptive, that it's all taken care of.
Nice. Andy, anything to add to that?
No, just I think for me, the fact that, as I've already talked about, the fact that we can run so many different scenarios, because we're kind of constantly looking both in the long and the short term, and particularly when we look at the long term, we like to do different analysis based on kind of high to middling to low level risk assumptions. So being able to do that in adaptive is really useful, and to then draw up a budget where we kind of compare different assumptions and think about what different scenarios will look like is incredibly useful.
No, excellent. And Ribu, anything to add?
From my point of view, I think more from a system perspective, it's more about the integration from a finance system, from an HR system, and integration into something more like a Tableau. That, to me, that's extremely important. Adaptive has been able to help us move along this journey of having integrated data flows between the systems. That's an extremely important thing for me.
Yeah, fantastic. No, that's really, really good insights, team. And again, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure I'm sharing that on behalf or extending a thank you on behalf of the audience today. Really appreciate the sharing, the insights, and again, congratulations on the listing and all the best for what's ahead with SiteMinder. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving on to our next segment now, and I'll be handing over to Marcus Dietrich, who will be taking us through a product demonstration.
Thank you, Vince. So let me now give everyone an overview of how we can do scenario forecasting and scenario planning with Workday Adaptive Planning. So what we're seeing here, I'm having a dashboard here with which I can access all the relevant aspects of my forecast. We are currently in March, and we have already closed our February actuals. So what we want to do now is we want to start building right away our forecast. I am the business unit representative for the sales region North here. So I am responsible for all the business aspects of this business unit. For example, workforce, sales, CapEx, travel, operating expenditures, etc. And what we're looking at the moment is the KPIs for my forecast March 22 worst case. So in the top right here, I'm able to access all the versions that are relevant for my business. For example, there may be top-down versions, there may be bottom-up versions, there may be various forecast versions. And as we heard earlier from our presenters from SiteMinder, we encourage our customers to utilize as many versions as they need to run their business. This is where Workday Adaptive Planning is very strong on. So as said, we're currently looking at our March 22 worst case scenario. But let me start working with my best case, because I think that's a scenario that I'm going to submit later for my March forecast. Now, when I'm saying March forecast, what do I mean by that? So let's zoom into this time series here in the bottom left, which gives me an overview of all the KPIs of this forecast version of scenario that we're looking at. March 22 forecast means we have finalized actuals until including February. So I can see that here from this green overlay. This green overlay in Workday Adaptive Planning indicates to me the actual data in our version. And then from March onward, we are building our forecast. We can see here we are forecasting out until December 23. So we're almost doing a 24-month forecast. We're forecasting until the end of the next financial year. So although we're doing a 22-month forecast here, we still want to have a bit of a focus of the current financial year, because that is a milestone in our forecast, which means the KPIs that I see in the top left show me where my current forecast, the best case, compares, how it compares to my budget. For example, I can see I'm forecasting for the financial year 7.4 million of revenues. This number here shows me the variance to budgets is 1.2 million above budget. We are forecasting 1.4 million OPEX, which is 307K above budget. But my key KPI that I'm as a business unit executive being measured on is net income. We're forecasting 2.4 million net income for this current financial year, which is 570K above budget. So that's quite good compared to the budget. I can actually see where how my budget transitions into the forecast. When I go into this waterfall here, we can see our budget is 1.2 million that we need to achieve. And I can see the different components that help me exceed that in this scenario that I'm building at the moment. For example, I'm building to build 1.2 million additional revenue. Additional revenue also comes with additional cost of goods sold. So that's a compensating effect here that brings my net profit down. And I can see here that we're having 100K additional payroll expenses. So the scenario that I'm building here, but we're bringing hiring forward through which we are able to increase our revenue. And the additional cost of that is tremendously being compensated through the additional revenue. So in the end, I'm ending up with a higher forecasted net income as budgeted for. Although the majority of the KPIs here are focused on the selected forecast version, which is my March 22 best case, I can also always compare my various scenarios against each other. For example, here we're looking at our net income budget compared to my best case, to my normal case, and to my worst case. But as said earlier, I think the best case is scenario that I'm going to submit for this forecast. So let me just do a few small additional tweaks and then we can submit that. One of the tweaks I'd like to make is with regard to the inflation. So I spoke to our resident economist and he said, our inflation forecast here for my region, my business unit, looks a bit bleak. Things seem to be easing a little up. So he suggests it may be a good idea to bring that a little down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down my inflation rate to 2.5% from May onwards. And I think we can even bring it down to 2% from September onwards. So inflation rate is a typical example for an assumption or global driver that drives various aspects of your business. In this example, it drives recurring operating expenses, to some degree also material costs. It may even affect hiring because new hires ask for more salary because of inflation. So what's going to happen here, once I save these changes, we will see how my OPEX variance will go down. So let me do that. I save this change that I've just made here for the global driver. And immediately in real time, I can see how this cascades to my entire business model, which means I can see how my operating expenses go down to 300K and how my net income slightly increased. It's just a small increase, but every little bit counts here. So there's one more change that I would like to make. Because our net income looks very good through the additional revenue, I have the approval by the CFO that I can give a Wi-Fi allowance to my staff. So that's something only my business unit gets. No one else gets that. I've got the approval for that because my forecast just looks very good. So what I want to do now is I want to build the Wi-Fi allowance in here, but I don't have an account for it simply because we didn't we didn't think we would need that. And I don't think I want to go back to the FP&A department to create a new account just for me. Not that it would technically be a problem, but from an organizational standpoint, they may not like me doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lump the Wi-Fi allowance into my telephone allowance. We see here in my OPEX, I have a line, an account here, telephone, that I'm currently planning for with $344. And there's a little blue indicator in that cell that tells me this is actually calculated with a formula. So what I can do is I can do a right mouse click here and explore that cell and see how it is being calculated. So this telephone allowance is being calculated using the FTE that I'm planning for times an assumption the telephone allowance per head, which is 8.6x FTE that I'm forecasting this instance for, times a $40 allowance, which gets us to $344 in March. I could now go and edit this formula right away. But if I do that, then I'm going to lose the initial information. How much was telephone allowance? I rather want to separate it out, telephone and Wi-Fi allowance. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to create a split, and I call this split telephone allowance. So now we see that initial formula for telephone has moved into the split, and I add another split. I call this Wi-Fi allowance. Now I have an area where I can start building my allowance. And the way I'm going to do it is I do it exactly like I would do it in Microsoft Excel. I press the equal sign, I point to my FTE, which is here at the bottom, and then I multiply that with $20, which is the allowance that I want to give every head. All I need to do then is I just extend this formula until the end of my forecast and save it. And once the screen is refreshed, as a result, we see we have a Wi-Fi allowance of 172 here now for March and 152 for April, etc. for the rest of the periods. And these formulas are dynamic. They're dynamically based on my FTE, which means if for some reason I need to delay hiring, then my FTE will change, and I don't need to go back to change the Wi-Fi allowance. It will adjust automatically. So let's take a quick pause. What have we actually done here? We've not just done planning and forecasting, we actually started building a little business model here. We built a model around Wi-Fi, which is dynamically linked to other KPIs in the application. And this is something that only Workday Adaptive Planning can give you. With Workday Adaptive Planning, the FP&A department can allow the business users to build model within the guardrail that the FP&A department sets. And as said, that is unique to Workday Adaptive Planning. Okay, I think I can now submit this as my forecast. The best case looks very reasonable to me. I can look into my P&L here and compare once more on detail account level my different scenarios. For example, this is the different net incomes, how they're fanning out across best case, normal case, worst case. I think I'm good with this. What I actually need to do next, I need to go into my forecast meeting where I need to present this best case scenario that I would like to submit. And the way I want to do that is through Microsoft Excel. So I switch to Microsoft Excel here. I just like to have my data in Excel, although what we learned earlier from SiteMinder, Excel is not really a good tool for planning, but it's still a good tool for reporting. We with Workday Adaptive Planning promote the use of Excel when it comes to reporting and planning. So what I can actually do is, this is a workbook that I already used last month for my January closing and when I built my February forecast. Fortunately, I don't need to copy and paste my numbers now back into this workbook for my presentation. I can actually draw those numbers dynamically from Workday Adaptive Planning. All I need to do is roll this forward. It's no longer January that we closed February. So let me roll it forward to February. and refresh. We can see the numbers now updated in real time and brought the latest actuals for February 22 into this workbook for me. And the way this works is by tagging individual cells in Excel with the business logic and with the business accounts from Workday Adaptive Planning. I can actually show you which cells have been tagged. All the blue cells here retrieve data from the application into the Excel workbook. It means you can continue to use your existing Excel workbook for reporting and just populate the numbers from Workday Adaptive Planning. What you can also see here, looks like I forgot to tag some of the cells. So let me quickly do that. Just bring up the task pane, expand my accounts. I highlight the taxes to other expenses, drag and drop them onto the grid. You can see now they have been tagged. I refresh, and my number being automatically populated. Let me just highlight one more thing here. Just because I missed a few rows here in between, doesn't mean that my net income was wrong, because the net income was also drawn from the application. It was not calculated on the sheet here. So which means all I missed was a bit of detail, but I did not have wrong numbers when I missed to tag those lines. So last but not least, I want to bring in my latest forecast. This sheet here still shows my February forecast. So let me just flip that to my best case scenario, refresh. And I have the latest numbers that I was just forecasting in my Excel workbook here. And again, I can see with the green overlay, this is including actuals until including February 22. So let me just refresh the rest of the workbook as well. Then I'm ready to go into my forecast meeting, a forecast presentation. And ideally, I'd like to present using PowerPoint. So here's my PowerPoint. That's the one that I used last month for the February forecast meeting. And again, I don't need to rebuild this PowerPoint. I just refresh it. Currently, it shows my January actuals, and it shows the January actual here, as well as the February forecast. So, and once I refresh that, you will see that this will all update to the latest numbers. Now we have the February numbers in here. My February actual closing is here and well. And our latest estimate now shows my preferred forecast that I would like to submit, the forecast March 22 best case. So I'm ready to go into my forecast meeting now.
우리는 최근 많은 변화를 겪고 있습니다. 비즈니스를 운영하는 방식, 고객을 응대하는 방식, 직원과 상호작용하는 방식이 변화하고 있습니다. 또한 그 변화의 속도는 점점 빨라지고 있습니다. 워크데이는 변화에 적응하는 기술을 제공함으로써 고객이 변화를 준비할 수 있도록 지원하고 있습니다. 점점 더 많은 대기업들이 워크데이로 전환하고 있는 이유가 여기에 있습니다. 포춘 500대 기업의 48%가 전사 HR 시스템으로 워크데이를 선정하였으며 단 20%만이 경쟁사의 클라우드 솔루션을 선택하였습니다. 이제 고객들은 워크데이를 단순 벤더가 아닌 진정한 파트너로 인식하고 있습니다. 빠른 시스템 구축, 전담 지원팀, 활발한 사용자 커뮤니티가 현재와 미래의 성공을 보장하고 있습니다. 포춘 기업 리스트에서 상위에 랭크된 기업일수록 워크데이를 더 잘 이해하고 있습니다. 포춘 100대 기업들은 워크데이를 다른 어떤 경쟁사들보다 더 깊이 신뢰합니다. 상위 50대 기업의 70%가 워크데이 고객이라는 점이 그것을 증명하고 있습니다. 지금의 외부 환경은 매우 불확실하지만 한 가지만은 분명합니다. 워크데이가 HR과 재무 부문에서 업계를 리드하는 기업용 클라우드 솔루션이라는 것입니다. 포춘 500대 기업, 포춘 100대 기업이 선택한 워크데이. 동행하실 준비가 되셨습니까?
네, 좋은 발표 감사합니다. 네, 시나리오 예측으로 변화에 적응해 남들보다 한 발 앞서 나갈 수 있는 방법을 확인할 수 있는 시간이었습니다. 웨비나에 대해 궁금하신 사항이 있으시면 댓글로 남겨주시거나 지금 나가고 있는 문의처로 연락 주시면 답변 드리도록 하겠습니다. 방송 후에는 설문에 참여해주신 분과 좋은 질문을 남겨주신 분을 추첨해 경품을 보내드리겠습니다. 많은 참여 부탁드립니다. 네, 이상으로 전자신문 올쇼TV가 마련한 급변하는 비즈니스 환경에서 원활한 적응을 위한 능동적인 계획 프로세스 구축 방안 웨비나를 마치겠습니다. 실질적인 업무를 진행 중이신 많은 시청자분들께서 도움이 되셨기를 바라며 올쇼TV는 또 다른 웨비나 방송으로 시청자 여러분들을 찾아뵙겠습니다. 시청해주신 여러분 고맙습니다.